Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 288 for the 27th of April 2014. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. And before we get into the show, yes, to all those people who think they saw me, or someone who looks like me on the latest episode of Modern Family, the one where they're in Australia, yes, that was me. I had a great couple of days working on that show, sort of in the background there. But don't worry about Modern Family. What's happening in the world of modern skepticism? We're going to kick off the show with a grain of salt from Eran Segev, who was lucky enough to be at QED, Question Explore Discover in Manchester. Eran, this week, catches up with a great magician and a great entertainer. I had the pleasure of seeing this man perform in Manchester, a knockout act, Paul Zenon, magician and skeptic. He's going to be chatting about QED, of course, and something about the relatively recent story with the psychic, the person who bills herself as a psychic, Sally Morgan. That's coming up at the start of the show. Following that, It's a Week in Science with Paul Willis from the Royal Institution of Australia. And then coming up later in the show, a full interview with Paul Willis from the Royal Institution of Australia. He's going to be chatting about his recent trip to the Antarctic. Oh, so jealous, would love to go. And also an upcoming tour about the science of Doctor Who. Also coming up on this week's show, it's the return of Jo Alabaster with her new segment, Evidence Please. Jo's going to be reading a report about now what's the word we can look for? Maybe you could run to your thesaurus and look up lunatic, about the anti-vaxxers out there in our society. Ah, what a funny bunch they are. For those people in Sydney, don't forget to come along to Sydney Skeptics in the Pub, the first Thursday of the month. And that means this Thursday coming up at the Crown Hotel in Sydney. Details at www.skeptics.com.au. And for everybody all around the world, I sincerely advise you to run without delay. Do you run on the internet? I don't know. Surf to the page of the Friends of Science in Medicine, www.scienceinmedicine.org.au, and subscribe to the newsletter. Now, this is a group of people, we've covered these people before on the Skeptic Zone. We've certainly chatted about them and interviewed them. Friends of Science in Medicine, promoting and supporting and defending good science and good medicine in Australia. But now it's time for me to run downstairs and have some satay chicken. Satay chicken and rice. That peanut sauce, folks, I tell you. Wow. Satay. Oh, yes. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
Grain of salt. Grain of salt. Grain of salt.
Let's all take this with a grain of salt. Here's Eran Segev.
Grain of salt now. Grain of salt, you gotta take it with a...
I have with me here Paul Zenon, a magician, an entertainer who was the MC for QED. Hello, Paul.
Hello, how are you doing?
Very good. So let's start by asking about your relationship to skepticism.
Yeah, it kind of came a little bit out of the blue a couple of years ago when I got asked to perform at QED here in Manchester. And I wasn't particularly aware of the whole skepticism movement, but kind of found out that I'd sort of been involved in it solo for a while in terms of mainly due to an interest in debunking psychics and mediums and all sorts of paranormal type stuff. But also I do a lot of stand-up comedy as well as the magic, which is related to, I suppose, pranks and hoaxes and things like that. And it's all about kind of trying to get round the system. So it is critical thinking. I did a TEDx talk about airport security, for example, and it was how to mess about with it, just to kind of point out the flaws in their theatre of whatever.
Did you include a section in that talk about how to do it without getting arrested?
No, it was one of the lines in it was actually, it's kind of it's how to dick about with airport security if you don't mind doing 2 years inside for a laugh. You know. Yeah.
So what came first, skepticism or the skepticism bit or the magic bit?
I suppose the magic kind of came first because I wasn't aware of the term skepticism until a few years ago, really. But it's kind of closely related in the sense that when I was a kid, the word trick was always appealing, because a trick was a thing that could be funny, like a practical joke, or it could be a magic thing, or it could be kind of a con, you know, that kind of con man type thing. I was always fascinated with films like The Sting and Paper Moon and things, which was about non-violent crime, so clever, you know, heists and things like that. And I think that's the sort of link with skepticism. It's about using deceit, but in a clever way, so it becomes a kind of intellectual challenge, you know. And so there's that parallel with the critical thinking idea. Just trying to work out ways of getting around things, you know. There used to be a cartoon strip in a comic when I was a kid called Roger the Dodger, and there was this kid who was trying to get away with things and not, you know, the easiest route. It's kind of crime without malice, basically, you know. And so that's what I've always been interested in. So my, I suppose, stage persona is a bit of a con man, really. And so you become a kind of expert in deceit in general, and I think that's why magicians kind of have got a history of debunking things like mediums and psychics and whatever, is because it takes a thief to catch a thief. You know, you're telling lies for a living and using deceit, and so when you see someone else using it. But being a magician is very honest, because you're actually telling people the premise of your entertainment is that you're deceiving them.
Yeah.
And you tell them that.
I actually want to ask you about that, because you were on a panel with Mark Edward and Richard Wiseman.
That's right, Magic and Skepticism.
Magic and Skepticism.
Yeah.
And one of the things that came up there was about the question about whether it is okay to, especially with mentalism, to pretend to be a mentalist without actually saying to the audience. So obviously there are situations where you don't need to actually say anything. People buy tickets and they know they're coming to a show. You don't need to actually say anything. It's okay to pretend, because, like, you know, the actor playing Othello doesn't say, "I'm not really Othello." People know what they're getting. Yeah. But there are situations, obviously, when that's not so clear cut. And Mark Edward said that depends what the producer or whoever pays wants.
I think it was basically saying if he got paid enough, he'd say whatever, you know. Which is kind of fair enough. I just, from an ethics point of view, I think it's interesting that, you know, we have a performer here in the UK, I don't know if he's made it to Australia in terms of TV stuff, called Darren Brown, and he's a kind of psychological, illusionist. And it's an interesting thing, because even though he tells lies about how he supposedly does things, you know, I'm reading body language, and I know because your left ear twitched and you moved your right elbow, I know you chose the 6 of spades, you know, and it's kind of it's a bull argument. However, it's kind of, you know, it's conceivable that could be correct, because people do read body languages in certain situations. That, to me, is very different from saying that you're actually psychic and can predict the future or talk to the dead and whatever. Because the problem with that, even if you're doing it as a form of entertainment, you're propagating the idea that stuff actually exists. Yes. You know, and that's not healthy in terms of, you know, evolution, apart from anything else. And so, you know, it might well be that someone sees you on TV and you go, yeah, no, my psychic powers are telling me that you chose the colour red and whatever. You go, that's no big deal, is it? It's not doing it. But then someone watching that goes, well, these people exist, so maybe when that lump appears in my neck, I'll go and see that, that person who claims to be able to cure that sort of thing by making me drink my own urine or whatever it is. And so it's just propagating false beliefs in the name of entertainment. It's quite unforgivable, I think.
But you are not a stranger to telling a bit of a lie yourself. For example, you have pretended to be a father, a concerned father, worried about the child being eaten by a python.
this is and that's the end of the podcast. They'll just have to wonder what that was about. Basically, I've done a few hoaxes and a few prank things, and actually partly to point out how gullible the press are and the public in general, and so we shouldn't, you know, my basic message through that is just we shouldn't believe everything you read, which most people realise, but some people don't. A lot of people
read the Daily Mail.
A lot of people read the Daily Mail. I can't say too much about the Daily Mail because of you know.
We'll get to that.
So I've done a few kind of hoax stories just to see how far and it's just kind of schoolboy mischief, basically, you know. But that's telling a lie, but it's not actually setting up a belief that's going to harm anyone long term, you know. So they might keep their kittens indoors for a couple of days because they think there's an 18-foot python at large. That's not going to harm them, is it? And who knows? There might be another wild animal out there for real. I'm struggling now, but actually,
You're
that's
protecting them from the panthers.
Yeah, that's a bit of fun, and it's just demonstrating the way the media works. There's a big difference between that and a certain well-known psychic on TV who said that they're sending healing messages to someone, and there's a whole thing about what harm do mediums do. An old lady pays her money and goes and sees a show, and it brings a bit of comfort to her. So what harm does it do? And you go, well, you wouldn't say the same about a cowboy builder. Someone who pretends that some slate's missing off someone's old lady's roof and charges her a few $1,000s, pounds, whatever, for fixing that. And it's a fake thing. And you go, what harm does it do? If she's got the money and it brings her a bit of comfort, but everybody's dead set against that, and there are laws about that. Unfortunately, the same thing with psychics and mediums who will take money off people when they're grieving and vulnerable. There aren't really any laws about it. The laws changed here in the UK a few years ago about it, and now it's a trading standards thing, but it's not actual law.
And speaking of psychics, you have an interesting relationship with Sally Morgan. I don't know what you're allowed to say.
Well, this is the problem. The difference between I'm not sure of the libel laws in Australia, but we have very antiquated laws here in the UK. And the problem is that if you suggest something negative about someone, they can sue you. Now, basically the story is that Sally Morgan, famous psychic here, who's now touring Australia, I think she toured last year, and the problem is I wrote an article for the Daily Mail which was there's a suggestion that she may have been using an earpiece on stage, and I wrote an article about that and how some psychics cheat and all the rest of it, and then I discovered some evidence that she does actually wear an earpiece on stage. The problem was with the whole libel case is that it's actually about what that earpiece was used for. But the suggestion from the newspaper, not from myself, I hasten to add, was that she may have been using it for cheating. And so she sued the newspaper, and technically she won because there was an out-of-court settlement, which is a ridiculous situation, because the original article, as far as I'm aware, didn't actually accuse her of cheating. It was just pointing out that she may have used an earpiece. And funny enough, she did. But it was apparently for stage directions. Not sure what those stage directions.
Yeah, but this was around the same time that he came up with these two Irish girls, if I remember correctly, right?
That's what it was about. It was basically these a couple of Irish women had phoned a radio station in Dublin and said that they'd heard voices from the back of the theatre from the projectional lighting box, and that the medium on stage was saying the same things a short while later. So the assumption of the radio presenter and of the women in retrospect was that she may have been fed information. So it's a discussion about that in the article, but no outright accusation from me. However, because the libel laws, people are saying, well, it's great because she'll have to prove that she is actually psychic. It doesn't work that way. The way the libel law works is that the person who is sued has to prove everything. There's no onus on the person, So I said to the male lawyer initially, I said, well, how about if I say in court that the reason, this happened is because I heard it from my spirit guide Geronimo, and that's what the situation is. He said, well, I think they'd think you were taking the piss, to be honest. And well, she started it. It's the same argument, isn't it? It's, you are actually talking to dead people. Okay, well, how is that any less ridiculous?
Yeah, you could bring your fake python to the court to support you in that idea.
It's got to be no, Jesus told me. It's got to be the truth. So we have to be very careful, and it's a ridiculous situation because, and this is why newspapers don't generally report psychics being caught out, or they're happy to run stories about ghosts and all the rest of it because it's cheap and it's easy and people are interested in that kind of thing, and they don't actually take any risk with the positive stuff. They take a risk with the negative by saying, oh, is this person cheating or whatever. They're putting themselves on the line then, So it's just easier for them not to.
Yeah. So, when you're not doing skeptical conferences, what do you do? I'm
a kind of jobbing performer, really. I kind of perform at mainly kind of doing corporate work, business conferences. I kind of host awards ceremonies and do after dinner cabaret stuff, kind of stand up and tricks and things. A few cruise ships, just, that kind of thing. But doing a little bit of acting these days.
So the cruise ship is probably presumably to lower the average age of the...
The cruise ship's audience have got a bit younger now, the kind of... certain cruise lines who shall remain nameless also because of libel laws, we used to call it Club 80 to Dead. But there, you get to go some quite interesting places these days. You've got some quite exotic routes around, and it's pretty well paid, and it's nice food, and you don't have to spend anything. So it's kind of a nice, easy one. But the audiences are tend to be a little bit low energy because they're on holiday, and but that's kind of a nice thing to do 3 or 4 times a year,
And is there any chance that most of the, or at least a significant proportion of the listeners to this podcast will be Australian? Any chance that they would see it in Australia anytime soon?
Hopefully. There's no major plans at the moment, but I used to go to Australia reasonably regularly, and I play the Adelaide Fringe Festival and Melbourne Comedy Festival, and I think we did Brisbane.
Sydney Comedy Festival is next week, so you might be a bit late for that.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a show over there called La Soiree that I've worked with a few times, which is kind of like an adult circus thing, which I think was in Sydney recently, actually. Melbourne and Adelaide, and played it in New Zealand as well. And that's an interesting thing, that there's a whole kind of resurrection of variety these days, so it's not that kind of naff, cheesy old school thing. It's actually sort of now quite a cool thing again. So for something like a magician, people still think of magicians as wearing bow ties and a top hat and having an assistant in a sparkly costume, but with the whole street magic thing, of course a rabbit, and with the whole kind of street magic thing on TV that we kind of kicked off whenever it was, I suppose about 15 years ago now. It's all of a sudden it's a little bit cool again, So, but I'd like to get back to Australia, but I'm trying to do a bit more acting now, and I'd like to come back and do probably Adelaide's maybe next year, or if not year after. The problem is everything's booked so far ahead because of the programme and getting stuff printed and whatever. So even now for Adelaide next February, it's kind of getting a bit late,
Yeah, I know.
But I'll hopefully get back there before too long. Yeah.
Speaking of acting, I just want to mention that you were the lead actor in a short video, about 2 minutes long, I think, that opened proceedings.
Which I think will be online, but it's going to go online, I think, in a few days' time, so you can probably.
Yes, by the time this goes up, hopefully we'll be able to provide a link. It was fantastic. It was really, really funny.
It's very kind of a sort of sceptical base, and I'm not sure anybody who wasn't a skeptic would get many of the gags in it, but the basic premise is it's me in the hotel where we are now, waking up and getting ready for the conference, but lots of sort of in gags. And what was quite funny, we actually, confession now, we actually shot Welcome to My World of Deceit, but we actually shot the video in London. It wasn't this hotel, and it was quite funny because we had a small crew there, and the hotel said, probably better that you don't film in the corridors because just the guests will wonder what's going on. And sure enough, we filmed a bit in the corridor, and I think everyone thought it was a gay porn shoot because I'm wearing my bedroom gear, and there's 4 guys and a camera in a bedroom. What could be going on here?
Okay.
Funny enough, we made one afterwards.
Paul, thank you very much for being on the Skeptic Zone.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Grain of salt now. Grain of salt, you gotta take it with a...
Now on Belfast FM, we turn to the personal ads. Easygoing and confident skeptic seeks other critical thinkers for fun, laughter and good times. Must be willing to apply logic liberally and a good listener. Expect something new and interesting every month. Come and meet me in Belfast in Northern Ireland. If this sounds like you, check out my profile on belfastskeptics.com. Music by Kevin MacLeod.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science news you need to know. Can misinformation kill? When it comes to vaccinations, most definitely. It's time to take a look at some of those anti-vaccination myths. Perhaps the most enduring myth about vaccinations is a link between the MMR vaccine and autism. It all originated from a 1998 paper published in the British medical journal The Lancet by surgeon and medical researcher Andrew Wakefield. Wakefield claimed a link between the vaccine that protects against measles, mumps and rubella, or MMR, and the incidence of autism. The paper has since been discredited, retracted and described as fraudulent. We now know that Wakefield had several undeclared conflicts of interest and he manipulated the data. Extensive independent tests have failed to replicate the results or show any links between the vaccine and autism. It's also been claimed that vaccines contain all kinds of toxins, including mercury. The mercury myth stems from the use of the preservative thimerosal in some vaccines. Thimerosal does contain mercury, but the dose in a vaccine is so low that extensive testing has shown that it's not considered harmful. But, just to be sure, it was removed from the production of all childhood vaccines in Australia in 2000. So there is no mercury in any modern vaccines given to children. The National Centre for Immunisation Research and Surveillance lists 16 diseases that are vaccine preventable and notes that in recent years they have been increasing in Australia as more people choose not to have their children immunised. This has led to several deaths. And now, 4 fast facts that counter anti-vaccination myths. The eradication of smallpox and polio does not mean that we can stop vaccinating for them. No vaccination is 100% effective. A vaccinated person is actually more likely to catch the disease, but the effects will be much less. Vaccines do not weaken or overwhelm the immune system. They actually strengthen it. And vaccines are not unnatural. They work by stimulating the body's immune system using naturally occurring agents. That's it for this Week in Science. For more information on vaccination myths, go to the RiAus website, riaus.org.au. Follow us on Twitter at RiAus and like us on Facebook. I'm Paul Willis, and we'll catch you next week.
Hey, Kenny.
Oh, hi, Tom.
Nice day at this park, yeah?
Yes, great weather.
Oh, look, a unicorn.
Unicorn? There are no such things as unicorns, silly.
Yes, there is.
No, there isn't.
Hey, guys, what are you arguing about?
Tom thinks unicorns are real.
They so are.
Let's look this up in the Skeptic's Dictionary.
The what?
How can we do this in this park? There is no computer here.
You guys probably don't know about the Skeptic's Dictionary app. Available now for iPhone, iPad, and iPod Touch in the App Store.
Wow, cool.
The app lets you access all of the great Skeptic's Dictionary articles when you're on the go. Here, let me look up unicorns.
Oh, cool. Kenny, prepare to be proven wrong.
It says here, the unicorn is a creature from fables.
Aha!
Actually, I see now that someone just dumped their ice cream cone on that horse's head. Thanks, Skeptic's Dictionary iPhone app.
What we want is some more evidence, please. Here's Jo Alabaster.
Hello, this is Jo Alabaster. From the Courier Mail, April 22nd, 2014, by Paul Zenon. I learnt a lot this past week. For starters, and I suspect many readers will be delighted to be apprised of this, apparently I am henceforth to be known as Paul, quote, Smegmahead, end quote, Zenon. And Queensland's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Jeanette Young, is, quote, Dr. Death, the super quack, end quote. According to Rita Terry of Caboolture, quote, flawed genetic input from every mating on all familial lines, from the original primordial ooze up to the unwanted scourge arrival of this pair, would be required to produce these two consummate duds. Is this the only explanation for their overt display of psychopathic excesses? End quote. Wow. There's a good B-movie script lurking in there somewhere. At least, unlike a lot of correspondence in recent days from various anti-vaccination cranks, the missive was not written in very shouty block capitals, with attendant highlighting. My crime was to write in support of the science that unequivocally demonstrates the benefits of vaccination against preventable and sometimes deadly diseases, such as whooping cough and measles, and to question the misleading and sometimes fanciful agitprop disseminated by the anti-vax evangelists. Thankfully, I've since been bombarded with a wealth of eclectic literature, much of it helpfully underlined or marked in bold, seeking to correct my clearly errant acceptance of modern medicine. Did you know, for example, that vaccines are responsible for the, quote, peanut allergy epidemic, end quote, which is a product of a, quote, pharmaceutical, medical, media and government cover-up, end quote. True fact. Or did you realise that the science behind herd immunity, where group immunity reaches a level, usually above 90%, that makes wide-scale transmission of a particular disease very difficult, is absolute bunk? I also learnt vaccinations actually make children much sicker and prone to various illnesses than those kids who haven't had a jab. I learnt this in an email that referred me to a, quote, study, end quote, done by a German homeopathic practitioner who conducted an internet questionnaire. Proof! Worse, there are apparently more sinister forces at work, and drug companies design vaccines to fail and actively create pandemics to boost their vaccine sales. Quote, epidemics are a marketing tool to create demand for a profitable product that people can be convinced to purchase over and over again, year after year, whether it works or not. And how do you create that demand? You engineer an epidemic by making sure your own vaccine products don't work. Fear drives people to get vaccinated, so fear is used as the primary marketing tool. End quote. This can all be found on one, quote, news, end quote, website, to which several anti-vaxxers helpfully directed me, where you can also find information such as, quote, scientists warn the rise of aluminium will lead to extinction of humankind, end quote, and, quote, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 now clearly a government cover-up, end quote. It is, I'm afraid to concede, all a conspiracy, and as one reader wrote, quote, the WHO and CDC are all a part of it too, stirring up irrational fear and panic like they did with the H5N1 virus a few years ago. It turns out that WHO panel members receive kickbacks from drug companies to engineer these anti-science scare stories, end quote. But we shouldn't be too hard on conspiracy theorists, for as reader Jake, who took issue with my use of the term wingnuts, warns, there are very valid questions to be asked about the push for the one world government, the origins of fluoridation of water in Nazi concentration camps, and the real circumstances of the 9/11 terror attacks. The truth, as they say, is out there. But you certainly won't find it talking to the religious cult that is the anti-vax movement.
In a world where the truth is a matter of opinion, where messages are received from beyond the grave, and reason is sidelined for magical thinking, only three men stand between the truth and a postmodernist abyss.
What date is it? 7th, 8th? 7th, 8th?
This is impressive.
Are these artist impressions?
They're not. They're photographs of Chinese lanterns.
It's not. It's not.
We are not well researched.
Yeah, because...
Good God, we're full of
We don't discuss cryptozoology on this show very often, because we don't know anything about it.
That's true, that is true. The price gets lower and lower and lower, and then he hits a ceiling?
It's a ceiling from the room below.
Skeptics with a K from the Merseyside Skeptic Society. Find us on iTunes. Or, don't.
Joining me now all the way from beautiful Adelaide in South Australia, the voice you know so well, it's Dr. Paul Willis from RiAus. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Richard. You're looking younger and younger every time I see you on Skype.
Oh, how embarrassing. I wasn't quite ready to be viewed, but there you go. And you're looking just the same. I don't know if that's a compliment or what.
Yeah, we might leave that one right there.
Now, what an exciting time you've had lately. We're going to be talking about all sorts of interesting things, what's happening at RiAus, Doctor Who, which is very exciting. I'm a big Doctor Who fan. But you've only relatively recently come back from somewhere that I've always wanted to go, the Antarctic. What were you doing there and what did you find?
This is one of my semi-regular jollies down to Antarctica. It was my 8th time down there. I go along with a tour company as their expert guide to show tourists the fossils that are found on the Antarctic Peninsula. But this time was a bit different from the previous trips in a number of ways. Firstly, the areas that we wanted to get into where the fossils are, we couldn't get anywhere near because the ice was so bad. Secondly, this trip was actually more focused on going in the footsteps of Ernest Shackleton. So we went from the Antarctic Peninsula across to South Georgia, it was my first time there, and then back through the Falklands to South America. So that was all new to me. And another thing that was different this time around was I got to take my 8-year-old son Chester. Trip of a lifetime. And I still don't think the penguins know what hit them.
What a thrill for an 8-year-old. What a thrill for any age, I would think. Now, we see stories on TV, you can see documentaries and reports, people sailing down to the Antarctic, and they're just gobsmacked by the icebergs when they first encounter the icebergs. Do you still get that?
Oh, yeah. But Antarctica steals a part of your heart and never gives it back. Every time you go down there, it's gobsmackingly beautiful. But this time round, getting to see South Georgia for the first time, that is also a gorgeous place. Very hard. But I nicknamed it Switzerland on Sea because, you know, you've got 3,000-metre peaks thrusting straight out of the Southern Ocean and fringed with hundreds of thousands of king penguins and baby fur seals. It's just absolutely an amazing place.
Wow, you're making me jealous, absolutely. But I find this whole idea of a continent full of fossils so interesting. And you tell the story once, of course, that you went down there on one of your many adventures and found a plesiosaur.
Yeah, look, it's not as if Antarctica is carpeted with fossils, but there are some very special islands on the eastern side of the Antarctic Peninsula where there are a number of different types of fossils from a number of different ages, but the ones that I'm particularly interested in are from the latest Cretaceous period, so really at the end of the age of the dinosaurs. And, you can literally be walking across an ancient seabed which is carpeted in fossils of various types of shells, marine snails and clams, and then suddenly they stop, and that line in the dirt where they stop, that's when the meteorite hit. That's when the dinosaurs were wiped out. And to be able to actually see firsthand an event that happened 65 million years ago, yeah, that sends a chill down my spine every time.
I can't help but wonder what amazing things are yet to be discovered in the Antarctic. I mean, new animals unknown to science. It just boggles the mind.
Yeah, and, as they're exploring around there, particularly underwater, they're finding all kinds of interesting things. It was only a few years back, about 5 years ago, that they found something that they think, they're still not quite sure, but they think is actually related to graptolites. Now, graptolites are fossils that were particularly abundant in the Ordovician period, so, about 480 to 510 million years ago, really old period. They were so abundant in that period that you can actually date the various layers of that period by the different types of graptolites that are found in it. And then they just disappeared. You don't find them in the fossil record at all after that very early period. And then a couple of years back, they found what they think is a living one under the ocean of Antarctica. So, yes, you're dead right. There's still lots and lots of stuff to be discovered down there, both as fossils and as living creatures.
Incredible. And, of course, when you go down, it's during the summer period in the southern hemisphere. You can't really go down there in the wintertime. Is it bloody freezing cold down there even in the summertime?
I know this sounds incredibly stupid of me, Richard, but something I'd forgotten that I was reminded forcefully this trip was how cold Antarctica is. It's bloody cold, and it's the kind of penetrating cold. I mean, I say it's bloody cold, but, I don't think we got down below -10 at any part of this trip.
But with wind chill, that could be awfully cold.
And it's that kind of cold that cuts through to the bone. You know, it's not just a cold environment. It's a cold internal, horrible feel.
Yeah.
But you can go down there prepared. You're rugged up. You have the gear to withstand that. And even at its worst, you're only exposed to it for an hour or so, and then you're back on board a nice warm boat, having a G&T, watching the icebergs float past. So it really is the genteel way to see the Antarctic.
Well, the people who are lucky enough to be your friends on Facebook would have seen various photographs come back from that part of the world, which was fascinating. And I noticed you took down your hat with the moose ears on it again.
Yeah, that's my dragon hat. I found that in New Zealand many years ago. What people ask me, why do I wear the dragon hat? It keeps my head warm, but also, there is another practical reason for wearing that, and that is that when we're out actually crossing various islands looking for fossils, we'll have 50-odd people spread out over quite an area, and I'm the only paleontologist along, and they're finding things and they want to find me in a hurry to be able to identify what it is that they found. And when I've got that hat on, everybody knows where the hell I am.
Well, there you are. It has a very practical point to it. You were wearing that hat a couple of years ago when you made a video to help the 1023 campaign, the anti-homeopathy campaign, and you're the person who is overdosed on homeopathy in further south than anybody else, I think.
Yes, that was quite a coup. That with there was that international event of people trying to overdose on homeopathic remedies, and someone said, "We've got every continent covered except Antarctica." I said, "Oh, I'm going to Antarctica. I'll be there on the challenge day." So, we actually had a lot of fun with that. I think the best part was the ship's doctor got involved and was quite happy to be involved. And he was standing by with the defibrillator in case something went wrong. But in the best spirit of homeopathy, we didn't plug the defibrillator in, expecting it to work on the memory of electrons having passed through its system. So, it was a bit of fun. It was a bit naughty. It was good.
That was good fun, because I remember you just got back to Australia. You came around to my place with the raw tape, and we edited that little video on the spot. I'll link to that video in the show notes for this week's episode. But now let's talk about things closer to home. Let's talk about the goings-on at the moment at the Royal Institution of Australia at www.riaus.org.au, as my listeners know very well. What's this about Doctor Who? Tell me more.
Look, we've been... it's a long, strange story as to how it came about, but essentially we've teamed up with BBC Worldwide, and we are taking a public event on the road across Australia. We're going to Perth, we're going to Brisbane, we're doing shows here in Adelaide, shows in Sydney and in Melbourne. And there's already plans to go around some of the smaller regional centres as well. Essentially, it's a show that looks at the science of Doctor Who. And we've got Rob Lloyd is a comedian who's actually the host of the evening, and we've got a lineup of top-notch scientists talking about things like regeneration, the TARDIS, can something actually be bigger on the inside than the out, life on other planets, extraterrestrial life, and time travel. Is there actually any science behind the way that the Doctor is able to so flippantly zap between time zones? So it's a big event. Because we're working with the BBC, we're allowed to use footage from the Doctor Who series to illustrate the points. And look, anybody out there who's has any interest in Doctor Who and any interest in science, get along. Do yourself a favour, as Molly Meldrum used to say. Do yourself a favour, get along and watch the show. You can find full details and book tickets through the RiAus website.
Well, that's really exciting, Paul, and I'm so glad that you're considering or hopefully going to do regional centres because, I grew up in a regional centre way up on the north coast of New South Wales, and we didn't get many things come our way. So I think regional Australia outreach is very important to that area.
Yeah, and, it's part of the whole mission of RiAus, where Australia's only national charity that deals in science communication and science engagement. And so how do we not only go to other major cities around the country, but how do we reach to the regional centres? How do we reach to people in their homes in the outback? And the online environment provides the opportunity to be able to do that. So, in the case of the Doctor Who series, that is a tour of live events at venues throughout the country. But most of what we're doing are events, most of them held here in Adelaide, but we live stream them and we have full chat room and Twitter backup so that you can be anywhere in the country and you can join in on the conversation. Last year, we had World Vasectomy Day.
Yes.
We had 17 vasectomies performed in Adelaide in front of our cameras, and we were able to use that as an opportunity to talk to people about men's health, family planning, and world population problems. And all of that got bundled up, was picked up by Reuters and beamed to newsrooms around the world. It's a huge, easy way for us to be able to communicate with people anywhere in the country, anywhere on the planet, and for them to be able to communicate to us. So it's an engagement. It's not just, someone talking about their favourite subatomic particle. If we're putting on an event, it's an opportunity for you, wherever you are, to be involved in a discussion on that particular area of science.
I think that's just the ticket too. And of course, your the weekly show you do, which is a video show and an audio show, The Week in Science from RiAus. My listeners certainly would know it as the audio version, but I'm sure many of them would also tune in and see the video version. That, I think, is such a worthwhile endeavour. I don't know how long it takes you each week or the institution each week to put that together, but whatever the time is, I think it's really great. It goes for 2 or 3 minutes. It's packed full of information, and it's an interesting little sciencey bit to round off the week.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. We're very proud of A Week in Science, and we've got all of the studio facilities to be able to make video content. So A Week in Science was just our opportunity to use that equipment to make science videos, regular weekly update science videos. And they've really taken off. They're not just seen through our networks, where we're getting something around about 30,000 views a week of the various Weeks in Science, all up across various platforms. But we've also the APAC channel on cable television. They are taking A Week in Science. And so the APAC channel is used widely by ministers and politicians. It's usually the channel that they'll have on the television in their office. So we're getting a little dose of science under the nose of politicians across the country by being able to go out through the APAC channel. So yeah, we're really quite proud of A Week in Science, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of hard work to pull together, but it's a lot of fun, and it's getting the sorts of audience that it deserves.
That's really good to hear. And just for the benefit of our international listeners, when Paul says it's getting to the attention of ministers, he doesn't mean religious ministers, he means politicians. Well, who knows? Maybe even religious ministers too.
Yeah, well, no point preaching to the converted.
Well, Paul, I keep threatening to come down to Adelaide to visit the Royal Institution of Australia. I will do it one day, I promise. I look forward to a personal tour of your vast collection of ancient South Pole beers or fossils or whatever you have for me.
Well, Richard, as you know, I've only been in Adelaide coming up to 3 years now, and I absolutely love it over here. I'll make sure you're looked after if you come over. And as I like to tell everybody about my setup here in Adelaide, I work in the centre of the city. I have a 20-minute drive to work, and 2 or 3 nights a week I'm woken up by koalas shagging outside my bedroom window. So how good is that?
What more could you want in life, apart from the odd trip to the Antarctic? Paul, before we go, when is the Doctor Who thing happening?
We're in Perth this weekend. Brisbane shows are on May the 10th. Shows in Sydney on the 23rd, 24th and 25th of May. In Adelaide on the 31st of May. And then in Melbourne we've got shows on the 13th, 14th and 15th of June. Promises to be a brilliant, fun show.
It certainly does promise to be a brilliant, fun show, Paul. I might even see if I can go along myself to enjoy the fun of Doctor Who and the science of Doctor Who. All the best with your continued adventures at the Royal Institution of Australia. And next time you go to the Antarctic, I hope you take an extra big suitcase for me.
Yeah, it would be a very large suitcase because there's a lot of people who want to go in it.
I'm sure they're right. Dr. Paul Willis from the Royal Institution of Australia, thanks very much.
Pleasure.
Did you see that UFO sighting that made the news? What did that latest study about alternative treatments really say? Is this photo making the rounds real or a hoax? Doubtful News is a unique website featuring news about pseudoscience, the paranormal, anomalies, and questionable claims framed with a skeptical view. Come visit doubtfulnews.com every day for news about cryptozoology, conspiracies, shams, scams, and more. Follow us on Twitter at Doubtful News. Critical thinking is essential in assessing today's news. Doubtful News helps you decide, can you really believe this stuff?
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Don't forget, coming up later on in the year, 28th to the 30th of November, here in Sydney, the Australian Skeptics National Convention, one not to be missed. Not to be missed, Dr. Karl Kruszelnicki will be there, and lots of other people. And, exciting news, Dr. Karl Kruszelnicki will also be at the amazing meeting this year in Las Vegas. More information at www.randy.org. And I noticed, and it's only just been announced, that Bill Nye, the science guy, Bill Nye, will be there as well. Wow, Bill Nye and Karl Kruszelnicki at the same convention. I wonder if there'll be like an atomic explosion of grey matter or something like that. Who knows? Who knows? But I look forward to being there. But for now, for this week, it's Richard Saunders, signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.